A black girl dressed in a stylish but casual streetwear hoodie and sneakers arrives at the sleek, glass-walled offices of Whitlock and Shaw. She's there for a mandatory meeting about the Adebayo Foundation project, for which she did the groundbreaking initial design. Bradley Whitlock sees her in the lobby, mistakes her for a delivery person, and publicly scolds her for using the main entrance. When she tries to explain who she is, he cuts her off, dismisses her ideas as unrefined, and tells her the firm has a certain image to uphold, handing her project off to a less talented but better presented junior partner. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air just changes? It gets heavier, like a door just closed somewhere and you're on the wrong side of it. That was me, Sloane Jacobs, walking into the pristine, air-conditioned nightmare that was the lobby of Whitlock and Shaw Architects. The place was a temple of glass and whispered money, all sharp angles and cold white light reflecting off polished concrete floors so clean you could probably eat off them. Not that anyone there would ever dare to make a mess. My sneakers, my favorite beat-up Chucks with the little paint splatters from late nights in the studio, didn't make a sound, but I swear every person in $1,000 suit heard me coming. I was there for the biggest meeting of my life, for the project I'd bled over for 6 months, the Adebayo Community Center. My designs, my concepts, the ones I'd poured my whole heart into, were finally getting a senior review. I had my tablet tucked under my arm, my digital portfolio buzzing with everything I wanted to say, my stomach a tight knot of nerves and excitement. I was so deep in my head, running through my presentation points, that I almost didn't see Bradley Whitlock himself, the managing partner, gliding toward me like a shark sensing blood in the water. His eyes did that thing I'd come to expect, a quick, dismissive scan from my faded vintage hoodie to my jeans to my sneakers. His smile was this tight, perfunctory thing that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, but his tone said, "The delivery entrance is around back." I took a quiet breath, willing my voice to stay steady. "Yes, hi. I'm Sloane Jacobs. I'm here for the 10 a.m. Adebayo project review." His smile didn't waver. It just got colder. "Jacobs, right. From the drafting pool." He said it like he was naming a minor, unpleasant department, like pest control. "The review has been moved to the main conference room. Clients will be touring the facilities later, so we need to keep the front clear for actual presentations." He gestured vaguely around the empty, echoing lobby. The insult was so perfectly packaged in corporate politeness that it almost didn't land at first. Keep the front clear. My face grew warm. "I am presenting. The initial structural concepts are mine." Bradley let out a soft, airy chuckle that was somehow worse than a full laugh. "The concepts have been developed by the senior team, Miss Jacobs. Your preliminary sketches were an interesting starting point, raw. But David Chen has taken the lead on refining the vision into something that aligns with the firm's standards." David Chen. The guy who spent more time choosing his tie than he did understanding the load-bearing requirements of a cantilevered roof. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was my project. The community center was for Westview, the neighborhood my abuela still lived in. I'd spent weeks talking to community elders, understanding the need for flexible spaces, for natural light in the daycare, for a courtyard that felt like the plazas back in Santo Domingo, a place for life to happen, not just a building to look at. "With all due respect, Mr. Whitlock," I said, my voice tighter now, the client specifically praised the innovative and culturally resonant aspects of the initial proposal. Those were my aspects. His mask of politeness finally slipped. His eyes went flat. "The client," he said, lowering his voice into a condescending hiss, "pays for a Whitlock and Shaw experience. That means a certain level of polish, a certain image. It's about trust. And frankly, Miss Jacobs, your aesthetic doesn't inspire the kind of confidence our clients require. This isn't a college studio. It's a multi-million-dollar project. We need people who look the part. He gave my outfit one last, withering look. David will ensure the project has the sophistication it deserves. You're to hand over all your files to him. That's all. He turned on his heel, his expensive shoes clicking decisively on the hard floor, a sound that echoed the finality of his words. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, the heat in my face now a burning shame. I could feel the receptionist's pitying glance, the curious looks from a few junior architects passing by. The brilliant, airy lobby felt like it was shrinking, the walls of glass closing in on me. I wasn't an architect to them. I was a problem to be managed, an aesthetic inconsistency to be tidied away before the real clients arrived. I clutched my tablet, my fingers leaving smudges on the sleek screen that held my dreams, now deemed not sophisticated enough. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, heavy weight in my chest. I had just been professionally erased in the middle of a lobby for the crime of wearing the wrong shoes. The click of Bradley Whitlock's heels on that polished floor might as well have been a door slamming shut. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, just breathing, trying to make the air go back into my lungs. The receptionist quickly looked down at her phone, pretending she hadn't witnessed my entire career being dismantled in under 60 seconds. That was almost worse than the dismissal itself, being someone's awkward moment, a piece of office gossip before lunch. I turned and walked out, the automatic doors sliding open with a soft sigh, like even the building was relieved to be rid of me. The Atlanta sun was stupidly bright, a complete contrast to the cold, shadowless world I'd just left. I got on the train, numb, the city blurring past the windows. People laughed on their phones, argued, lived their lives. I just felt hollow. My apartment is in an older building in Westview, the kind with character, weathered brick, real hardwood floors that creak, and big windows that let the afternoon light pour in. It's not a Whitlock and Shaw kind of place. It's a lived-in place, my place. The moment I closed the door behind me, the silence was different. It was safe. The anger started to thaw, replaced by this sharp, aching hurt. Your aesthetic doesn't inspire confidence. His words played on a loop in my head. I looked around my living room. It was chaos, but it was my chaos. A half-finished model of the community center's roof structure sat on the coffee table, next to a cup of cold coffee. Sketches were taped to the walls, layered over each other. Early ideas for the playground, studies of light patterns for the main hall, a page where I'd just tried to capture the way my abuela's hands looked when she was rolling dough for pastelitos. This wasn't just an aesthetic. This was my brain, my heart, spilled out all over the room. I dropped my bag and my tablet on the couch and went straight to the kitchen. I needed to do something with my hands. I pulled out plantains, oil, garlic. The rhythm of cooking is my therapy. Smash the plantain. Heat the oil, the sizzle and pop that fills the quiet. I was making tostones, abuela's way. As I fried them, the familiar comforting smell filling the apartment, I replayed the meeting I never got to have. What would I have said? How would I have explained that the seemingly raw curve of the community hall's roof wasn't just a design flourish? It was engineered to channel rainwater into a collection system for the community garden. That the placement of every window was calculated for passive solar heating, saving a non-profit thousands a year in utilities. That the central courtyard wasn't just pretty. It was a modern reinterpretation of a Dominican park, a heart for the community to gather the way we did back home. Bradley saw a drawing. He never saw the system. He saw a cultural reference. He never saw the infrastructure. He wanted a monument. I was trying to build a home. Later, with a plate of salty, crispy tostones and a cup of strong coffee, I opened my laptop. The email was already there, formal, from HR, but you could smell Bradley's cologne on every word. Reassigned for optimal project alignment. Your preliminary work on the Adebayo file is appreciated and will be properly integrated by the lead team. Please transfer all associated files to David Chen by end of day. Integrated. That's a nice word for stolen and sanitized. A hot tear of pure frustration finally escaped and landed on my keyboard. I wiped it away angrily. Crying felt like letting him win. But what was the alternative? Just give up? Hand over 6 months of my life so David Chen could slap a fancy facade on it and call it his own? No. Something in me, some stubborn, proud thing I inherited from a long line of stubborn, proud women who knew how to make a feast from scraps, snapped into place. Hell no. I didn't open the file server to upload my work to David. Instead, I opened my personal cloud drive. I started pulling every sketch, every CAD file, every environmental study, every single note, even the napkin where I'd first sketched the idea of using reclaimed brick from a demolished building in the neighborhood. I compiled it all into a new folder. I wasn't going to just hand it over. If they wanted my work, they were going to have to do it without my heart, and they wouldn't even know where to look for it. Then, I opened a fresh blank file on my drafting software. The screen glowed, an empty universe of possibilities. Bradley Whitlock thought he could shut me down, that he could put my ideas in a box labeled not sophisticated. He thought this was over, but he was wrong. This wasn't his endpoint. This was my new starting line. The anger was gone, burned away into a clear, cold focus. The light from the screen reflected in my eyes. Let David have the old files. I was about to design something even better. The main conference room at Whitlock and Shaw was a masterpiece of intimidation. A 20-foot-long slab of imported black walnut served as the table, reflecting the cold, precise light from recessed fixtures above. The walls were a gallery of the firm's vanity, gleaming awards and glossy renderings of glass towers that looked like they'd been grown in a lab, not built for people. The air smelled of expensive coffee, lemon polish, and a faint, cloying anxiety. Bradley Whitlock stood at the head of the table, a symphony in a Brioni suit. He was performing a final check, his fingers subtly straightening a perfectly aligned row of water glasses. His team, David Chen and a few other senior associates, sat stiffly, their postures screaming a mixture of nerves and ambition. They were presenting the refined vision for the Adebayo Community Center. David's laptop was hooked up to a massive screen, displaying a slick, soulless PowerPoint deck. "Remember," Bradley said, his voice a low, confident hum, "Adebayo is old money, new money, and self-made all rolled into one. He doesn't want quirky. He wants unassailable. He wants to know his money is safe with an institution, not an artist." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I was the ghost in the room, the artist whose messy heart had been surgically removed from the project. The door opened and Solomon Adebayo walked in. He wasn't what they expected. He wasn't loud or flashy. He moved with a quiet, grounded authority that didn't need to announce itself. He was in a beautifully tailored but simple navy suit, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed. His eyes, sharp and perceptive, did a quick, silent scan of the room, taking in every detail, the expensive table, the nervous team, the sterile art on the walls. He didn't smile broadly. He offered a polite, reserved nod. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman with a tablet, followed silently behind him. "Mr. Adebayo, a pleasure," Bradley said, his voice dialed up to its most ingratiating setting. He moved to shake hands, his grip perfectly calibrated. "Welcome. We're tremendously excited to share the evolution of the Westview project." "The evolution," Mr. Adebayo repeated, his voice a deep, calm baritone. He took a seat, declining the offered coffee. I was quite fond of the seed. Let's see what it has grown into. The presentation began. David Chen, his voice a little too eager, started clicking through slides. He talked about optimized square footage, premium material cladding, modernist design language, and maximizing curb appeal. The renderings flashed up on the screen. My original, organically curved roof was now a sharp, angular metal canopy. The warm, textured, reclaimed brick was replaced with smooth, gray prefabricated panels. The central courtyard, the heart of the design, had been shrunk and formalized, dotted with identical sparse trees and concrete planters. It looked like a high-end corporate campus. It looked like every other Whitlock and Shaw project. It looked cold. Bradley watched Mr. Adebayo's face, searching for a flicker of approval. But the client's expression remained unreadable, a placid mask. He would occasionally nod, but it was a nod of acknowledgement, not agreement. David finished with a flourish. And so, we believe this design truly reflects a forward-thinking, sustainable, and prestigious landmark for the community. There was a beat of silence. Mr. Adebayo steepled his fingers. "It is certainly very polished," he said, and the way he said polished made it sound like an insult. "The initial concepts I saw had a certain life to them, a connection to place. The rainwater harvesting integrated into the garden, the passive solar alignment, the use of local materials. I found that thoughtful. Where is that?" Bradley's smile tightened at the corners. "Of course, those were excellent foundational ideas. We've evolved them, refined them for structural efficiency and a more cohesive aesthetic." "Evolved," Mr. Adebayo said again, this time with a hint of something darker in his tone. His gaze drifted away from the screen, roaming the room as if the answer might be hidden in the walls. And that's when he saw it. Tucked in a corner, on a small, secondary pin-up board mostly used for inspirational clippings, was a single, framed conceptual sketch. It was one of my earliest ones. It wasn't a technical drawing, it was pure feeling. It showed the community center from a low angle, with kids running through the courtyard, old men playing dominoes under the shade of the roof, light streaming in. In the corner, I'd scribbled a quote from my abuela. "A house is made of walls and beams. A home is built with love and dreams." Everyone else in the room had seen it 1,000 times. It was part of the furniture. But Solomon Adebayo was seeing it for the first time. His eyes locked onto it. He stood up without a word and walked over to the board. The room held its breath. He leaned in, studying the energy of the lines, the feeling in the sketch, the handwritten note. He pointed a well-manicured finger at the frame, not turning around. "This. Who is the artist behind this?" The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Bradley Whitlock's face underwent a subtle but terrifying transformation. The confidence drained away, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen of panic. He looked like a man who suddenly realized he'd boarded up the windows and locked the doors, but the most important thing was still outside. He cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. That was a collaborative effort, early ideation. The whole team really vibed on that initial energy before we began the serious technical development. Mr. Adebayo turned slowly from the sketch. His calm demeanor was still in place, but his eyes had changed. They were now like lasers, pinpoint and intense, focused solely on Bradley. "I see," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "It is interesting. The collaborative effort has a signature. And this," he gestured back to the slick, dead renderings on the main screen. "This has no signature at all. It has a corporate logo." The silence in the conference room after Solomon Adebayo left wasn't just quiet. It was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. It was the sound of a bomb after it's gone off, that ringing, deafening absence of noise where there was once life. Bradley Whitlock stood frozen at the head of that obscenely expensive table, his hand still resting on the back of a chair as if for support. The color had not returned to his face. He looked like a man who had just seen his own ghost. On the massive screen, David Chen's final triumphant rendering of the sterilized community center still glowed, a monument to everything that had just gone wrong. It looked pathetic now, empty, a shell. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. David slowly, carefully closed his laptop, the soft click sounding like a gunshot in the void. Bradley finally blinked, his brain scrambling to reboot to find a foothold in this sudden freefall, latched onto the only thing it could: damage control. He straightened his tie, a jerky automatic motion. "Well," he said, his voice hoarse, trying to inject a note of bluster into the hollow room. "A tough client. Particular. We'll recalibrate. David, pull the initial Jacobs files. We'll find a way to reintegrate some of the more organic elements, tastefully." It was a pathetic, flailing attempt to put the genie back in the bottle. He still didn't get it. He thought it was about adding a few decorative bricks, a quirky roof shape. He didn't understand that the soul of a thing isn't an accessory you can bolt on later. The phone on the conference room console rang, its internal line tone shrill and unnerving. Everyone jumped. The receptionist's voice, tinny and strained, came through the speaker. "Mr. Whitlock? I have a Miss Evelyn Wright on the line for you. She says it's urgent." Evelyn Wright, Solomon Adebayo's executive assistant, the woman who had just walked out with him, her face an unreadable mask. Bradley's eyes flickered with a desperate hope. Maybe he's had second thoughts. Maybe he wants to schedule another meeting. He stabbed the speakerphone button. "Evelyn, so good to hear from you. I hope Mr. Adebayo got down to his car all right. We were just debriefing, lots of exciting ideas to—" Her voice cut through his rambling, cool, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the voice of someone reading a legal verdict. "Mr. Whitlock, I am calling on behalf of Mr. Solomon Adebayo. This call serves as formal notification that the Adebayo Foundation is terminating its contract with Whitlock and Shaw Architects, effective immediately. The reason for termination is cited as fundamental misrepresentation of creative authorship and a profound misalignment of core values." The air left the room. Bradley's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He gripped the chair back so hard his knuckles turned white. Evelyn Wright continued, her tone never wavering. "The Foundation will be exercising the morality clause in our agreement. All project files are to be preserved. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the return of all preliminary materials and the dissolution of our NDA." Bradley found his voice, a strangled croak. "Evelyn, please, there must be a misunderstanding. We can fix this. The Jacobs girl, she was a junior contributor. Her ideas were merely a springboard. We can give her a co-lead credit. We can—" "Mr. Whitlock," she interrupted, her voice gaining a faint, icy edge. "The decision is final. However, Mr. Adebayo has stipulated one condition upon which the project may continue, albeit with a new firm." Bradley leaned forward, a drowning man seeing a rope. "Anything. Name it." The pause on the other end of the line was deliberate, letting the tension coil to its breaking point. "The Adebayo Foundation will only move forward with the Westview Community Center," Evelyn Wright said, each word landing like a hammer blow. "If Miss Sloane Jacobs is installed as the sole lead architect and principal designer, Mr. Adebayo's belief is that the vision he invested in resides solely with her. He will not accept a diluted or managed version. Her leadership is non-negotiable." The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Sole lead architect. principal designer, non-negotiable. It was the most stunning, humiliating, catastrophic professional reversal imaginable. The junior contributor he had dismissed in the lobby was now the only key to saving the multi-million-dollar project he had just lost. The woman whose aesthetic didn't inspire confidence was the only person who inspired confidence in his most important client. Bradley didn't respond. He couldn't. He just stared at the speakerphone as if it had grown fangs. "The foundation will be contacting Miss Jacobs directly to extend the offer," Evelyn added, a final, elegant twist of the knife. "Good day, Mr. Whitlock." The line went dead. The dial tone buzzed, a flat, dead sound that seemed to go on forever. Bradley slowly reached out a trembling hand and pressed the button to end the call. The silence returned, heavier than before. He finally looked up, his gaze sweeping over his team, their shocked, pale faces, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and a kind of grim, awe-struck fascination. He saw the truth reflected back at him. He wasn't just a man who had lost a client. He was a man who had been judged and found utterly, publicly, worthless on the one thing he thought he was best at, judging value. The ghost hadn't just been seen. She'd been hired to haunt him, and her first act was to burn his house down. The buzz of my phone was an alien sound, a jarring intrusion into the focused little world I'd built at my kitchen table. I was deep in the zone, headphones on, a half-eaten plate of cold tossstones forgotten next to my laptop. The new design was flowing out of me, purer and sharper than before. It was born from defiance, and it was fearless. The phone buzzed again, skittering across the wood surface. I sighed, pausing my music. It was an unknown number, probably a recruiter or worse, someone from Whitlock and Shaw's HR following up on the file transfer I'd blatantly ignored. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something, maybe the same stubborn instinct that had me redrawing blueprints at 11 p.m., made me swipe answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice a little rough from disuse. "Miss Sloane Jacobs?" The voice on the other end was female, polished, and carried a calm, undeniable authority. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't warm either. It was professional in a way that felt entirely different from the cold, performative professionalism of Whitlock and Shaw. "This is she," I said, my guard instantly going up. I braced for the corporate speak, the veiled threat about contractual obligations. "My name is Evelyn Wright. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Solomon Adebayo." The name hit me like a physical blow. I sat up straight, my heart doing a sudden painful slam against my ribs. Adebayo. The project. Oh God. Bradley had somehow thrown me under the bus. They were calling to blame me for the project's failure, to threaten me with a lawsuit for what? Having ideas they stole? I stammered, my mind racing. "Listen, whatever Mr. Whitlock said, I need you to understand." "Miss Jacobs," she interrupted smoothly, her tone not unkind but firm. "This call is not on behalf of Mr. Whitlock. It is solely on behalf of Mr. Adebayo. He has asked me to extend his most sincere apologies." The world tilted. I was sure I'd misheard. "His apologies?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. "Yes. He apologizes profoundly for the treatment you endured at his expense. He was made aware this afternoon that the creative work he had admired and approved was, in fact, solely yours, and that you were subsequently removed from the project in a manner he finds deeply objectionable." I was speechless. I just held the phone, my knuckles white, listening to this impossibly calm voice dismantle the entire traumatic event of my morning. She wasn't angry at me. She was apologizing to me. "Mr. Adebayo has terminated the firm's contract," she continued, as if she were reading a weather report and not the most shocking news of my life. "The project is on hold. However, his belief in the vision for the community center, your vision, remains absolute. I could hear my own blood pounding in my ears. This wasn't real. This was a stress-induced hallucination. "Miss Jacobs," Evelyn Wright said, and for the first time, her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Adebayo would like to know if you would be willing to accept the position of lead architect and principal designer for the Adebayo Foundation Community Center in Westview. The project would be yours to run independently. Your team, your consultants, your timeline. The foundation would provide the capital and support, but the creative and executive decisions would be entirely yours." The kitchen, my safe haven, seemed to dissolve around me. The creaky floors, the smell of fried plantains, the sketches on the wall, it all faded into a blur. Lead architect, principal designer, yours. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they weren't tears of hurt or frustration. They were tears of a validation so profound and unexpected it was dizzying. This wasn't a promotion. This wasn't a pat on the head. This was a coronation. This was a billionaire philanthropist looking at the work I'd done, hearing how I'd been treated, and not only taking my side but handing me the keys to the entire kingdom. My voice was a choked whisper. I swallowed hard, trying to find any semblance of professionalism. "Miss Wright, I don't know what to say." "A yes or no will suffice for now," she said, a hint of dry humor in her tone. "You may take 24 hours to consider. The offer letter, with terms, will be in your inbox within the hour." Consider? Was she kidding? There was nothing to consider. This was the dream. No, it was better than the dream because, in the dream, I'd never factored in a villain like Bradley Whitlock, and I'd never dared to imagine a knight like Solomon Adebayo. "I don't need 24 hours, I said, my voice finding its strength, solid and clear for the first time all day. "Please tell Mr. Adebayo, thank you for seeing the work, and for this incredible faith. The answer is yes, absolutely yes." "Excellent," she said, and I could almost hear the faint smile in her voice. "Welcome to the Adebayo Foundation team, Miss Jacobs. I look forward to working with you. You'll be hearing from me very soon." The call ended. I slowly lowered the phone onto the table. I looked down at my hands, then around my kitchen, at the world that had just been utterly remade. The weight of the humiliation, the anger, the self-doubt, it was all gone, evaporated in the face of this staggering act of justice. I wasn't Sloane Jacobs, the dismissed draftsperson anymore. I was Sloane Jacobs, lead architect. The title didn't just feel like a job. It felt like my name. And for the first time since I'd walked into that glass prison, I took a full, deep, unimpeded breath. The air, even in my little apartment, had never tasted so free. The dust at the future site of the Adebayo Community Center was a fine, red Georgia clay that kicked up in little clouds with every step. I loved the smell of it. Earthy, real, full of potential. I stood there with Maria, the head of the Westview Community Board, pointing toward where the main hall would be, the afternoon sun warm on my back. I was explaining the revised drainage plan for the garden when I saw him. A black town car, ridiculously out of place on the rough, unpaved road, pulled up like a sleek, anxious beetle. The door opened and Bradley Whitlock unfolded himself from the back seat. He looked diminished. His perfect suit was wrinkled, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked like he'd slept in his office. He stood by the car for a moment, squinting against the sun, scanning the empty lot until his eyes landed on me. Maria followed my gaze. "¿Quién es ese? Un amigo? Who is that? A friend?" I let out a short, dry laugh. "No, Maria, not a friend. That's my old boss." Her eyebrows shot up. She'd heard the abridged version over cafecito. She crossed her arms, settling in to watch the show. "Ah, vino a comerse un plato de humildad." He came to eat a plate of humility. Bradley started picking his way across the lot, his expensive loafers getting coated in red dust. Every step was a small defeat. He stopped a few feet away, his hands shoved in his pockets, his posture a far cry from the powerful stance he'd held in the lobby. "Sloane," he said, and his voice had lost all its condescending polish. It was just tired. "Bradley." I didn't offer anything else. I just waited. The silence stretched out, filled only by the distant sound of traffic and the call of a bird. He was forced to stand in the discomfort he'd created. He cleared his throat. "I heard about the offer from Adebayo. That's incredible. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, my tone neutral. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. He hadn't earned easy. He took a shaky breath, plunging ahead with what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "Look, Sloane, what happened? It was a miscommunication, a big one, my fault, entirely. I misread the situation. I got caught up in the presentation of the firm." His eyes were pleading, desperate. "The project, it needs Whitlock and Shaw's resources. Our engineering team, our project managers. You're brilliant, but a project of this scale, it's a beast. You need the infrastructure behind you." He was doing it again. Even in his apology, he was condescending. "You're brilliant, but—" He couldn't help himself. "So," he continued, a flicker of his old smarmy confidence returning, seeing a deal to be made. "Here's what I'm thinking. You come back, not to the drafting pool, as a named associate partner, a huge bump in salary, a profit share. You lead the Adebayo project with the full weight and support of the firm behind you. It's a win-win. You get the title and the backing you need, and the firm, well, we get to continue the relationship with a valued client." He finally stopped, looking at me expectantly, as if he'd just offered me the keys to the city, as if he hadn't publicly stripped me of my dignity just yesterday. I looked past him, at the dusty, empty lot full of nothing but hope and red clay. I looked at Maria, whose face was a mask of silent, righteous judgment. I looked back at Bradley, this man standing in the dirt, still trying to play corporate chess when the game was already over. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the open air, clear and steady. "You think this is about a title, Bradley, or a salary?" He blinked, thrown. "Well, it's about doing what's best for the project." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "It's not. This is about you being afraid. You're not offering me this because you respect my work. You're offering it because you're scared of going under. You're scared of looking bad. This offer isn't based on respect. It's based on fear." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, stopping him cold. "I don't need the full weight and support of a firm that didn't see my value when I was standing right in front of them. I don't need your infrastructure. I already have everything I need." I gestured around me, at the land, at the community represented by Maria. "I have the client's trust. I have the vision. And I'm going to build a team that believes in that vision, not one that just knows how to present it." I took a step closer to him, the dust settling on my boots. "You told me my aesthetic didn't inspire confidence. But Mr. Adebayo's confidence in me is the only reason you're even standing here talking to me. So, no, Bradley. The answer is no. I already have a better offer from a client who values my work. I don't need a life raft from a sinking ship." The last bit of color drained from his face. The metaphor hit its mark perfectly. He stood there, utterly exposed, his pathetic offer lying in the red dirt between us. There was nothing left for him to say. He had come to bargain, and I had refused to even acknowledge his currency. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod, turned on his heel and walked back to his waiting car, a defeated man in a dusty suit. He didn't look back. Maria let out a low whistle. "Ay, Dios mío, le diste con todo." "Oh my God, you went all in on him." I watched the town car pull away, kicking up a final cloud of dust. I felt no joy, no schadenfreude, just a calm, solid certainty. The reckoning was over. The building could finally begin. The warehouse space we'd rented was nothing like the silent, sterile halls of Whitlock and Shaw. It was alive. The walls were raw brick, the floor scuffed concrete, and the air hummed with the sound of printers, the scent of fresh coffee, and the low, focused energy of a team that actually gave a damn. My team. Ben Ortiz had been the first to walk out of Whitlock and Shaw, his resignation letter a masterpiece of quiet fury. He'd brought two other junior architects with him, kids who were brilliant and hungry and sick of making coffee for guys like David Chen. We were a scrappy, underfunded, ridiculously optimistic little startup, and we were about to present to a billionaire. I stood in front of our pin-up wall, which was just a giant sheet of plywood we'd painted white. It was covered, top to bottom, in a mosaic of our work. Not sterile renderings, but a living, breathing story. There were CAD drawings next to my abuela's handwritten recipe for coquito, the notes about the spices somehow informing the color palette for the interior. There were structural stress diagrams layered over photos of kids playing in the existing Westview Park. There were fabric swatches for the auditorium seats next to a pressed flower from the lot itself. This wasn't a presentation. It was our manifesto. The door opened, and Solomon Adebayo walked in, followed by Evelyn Wright. He was dressed more casually today, a crisp button-down, no tie. His eyes immediately began their quiet, perceptive scan, but this time there was no judgment, only curiosity. He took in the chaotic energy, the exposed pipes, the makeshift kitchenette in the corner, the passionate, slightly nervous young faces of my team. "Miss Jacobs," he said, a genuine smile touching his eyes, "this is a proper workshop. It smells like ideas." "Thank you, Mr. Adebayo," I said, my own nerves settling. "We think so." I didn't call him sir. Respect, yes. Subservience, no. We were partners now. I led him to the wall, and for the next hour we didn't just talk about architecture. We told a story. Ben explained how the angled roof wasn't just for rain collection. Its specific pitch was designed to frame the view of the sunset during summer concerts in the courtyard. Lucia, one of the new juniors, her voice shaking with passion, detailed how the recycled tire flooring in the playground wasn't just eco-friendly, its specific shock absorption was calibrated for the unbridled energy of a 5-year-old and the more fragile knees of their abuelos watching them. I showed him the community. I had maps with colored pins showing where every single material was sourced from: the reclaimed brick from a local warehouse demolition, the timber from a sustainable forest in South Georgia. I had signed pledges from 3 local Westview contractors who'd been hired for the job. Then I got to the heart of it. I pointed to the central courtyard, the soul of the design. "This isn't just empty space," I said, my voice firm. "This is a plazza. In my culture, the plaza isn't a design feature. It's the lungs of the neighborhood. It's where stories are traded, where protests start, where couples first meet. The benches are arranged in semicircles, not straight lines, to encourage conversation. The stage is low and accessible, so a kid can jump up and recite a poem. The lighting is warm and low to make people feel safe to linger, not like they're under a spotlight. This," I said, turning to face him fully, "isn't a building you're funding, Mr. Adebayo. It's a heartbeat for a community that already has a pulse. We're just giving it a stronger place to beat." I finished. The warehouse was quiet. My team held their breath. Solomon Adebayo didn't look at the drawings anymore. He looked at me. His expression was unreadable for a long moment, and a cold dread started to creep into my stomach. Had I been too bold? Too informal? Had I? Then he slowly began to clap. It wasn't a loud, dramatic applause. It was a slow, deep, respectful clap, one hand against the other. Clap, clap, clap. Evelyn Wright, standing beside him, allowed herself a small, sharp smile. A heartbeat, he repeated, his voice thick with an emotion I hadn't expected. He looked around the room, at my team, at the passionate chaos. This is what I invested in, not walls and windows, a heartbeat. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched. I took it. His grip was firm, warm. Sloane Jacobs, it is an honor to work with you. He turned to Evelyn. Double the initial allocation for the community arts program, and set up a meeting with my lawyers. I want to explore the feasibility of a foundation, the Jacobs Adebayo Foundation, to identify and fund the next 10 young designers like this, the ones the polished firms are too blind to see. The air left my lungs. My team erupted in quiet, stunned cheers, hugs, and disbelieving laughter. Ben just shook his head, a huge grin spreading across his face. Mr. Adebayo wasn't just approving a design. He was investing in a revolution. He saw the system that had failed me, and he was using his power to dismantle it, brick by brick, starting with me. The standard hadn't just been met. It had been completely redefined. It was no longer about polished floors and whispered money. The new standard was heart. It was soul. It was a dusty warehouse full of dreamers, and a billionaire who knew that true value wasn't found in a boardroom but in the messy, beautiful, brilliant chaos of creation. We weren't just building a community center. We were building a new blueprint. In the world of high-stakes Atlanta architecture, news doesn't travel. It explodes. It's a small, incestuous community where everyone knows everyone else's business, especially their failures. The story of Solomon Adebayo dropping Whitlock and Shaw wasn't a piece of gossip. It was a seismic event. And the reason, the humiliating, spectacular reason, was the kind of juicy detail that gets whispered over expensive lunches at the Commerce Club and texted across construction sites. It became an industry legend, a modern-day cautionary tale. You hear about Whitlock? Became the opening line to a story everyone loved to tell. Yeah, he tossed the golden goose out the front door for wearing sneakers. The girl, Sloane Jacobs, Adebayo handed her the whole damn project. Gave her her own firm, basically. Whitlock and Shaw is finished. And they were. Not with a bang, but with a slow, excruciating unraveling. The first to leave were the clients. The ones with a certain image to uphold suddenly found that image tarnished by association. Why would you hire a firm that a man like Solomon Adebayo deemed unethical and creatively bankrupt? A flagship mixed-use development in Midtown pulled their contract. A museum renovation in Buckhead followed. The phone in Whitlock and Shaw's pristine lobby didn't just stop ringing. It seemed to actively repel calls. Then came the talent drain. It started with the best and the brightest, the senior architects and project managers who had options. They didn't want to be on a sinking ship, their resumes stained by the name of a firm known for its spectacular implosion. Their resignations were polite, professional, and utterly merciless. They were rats not just fleeing, but radioing coordinates to the other ships about the exact location of the iceberg. Bradley Whitlock became a ghost in his own glass-walled palace. He'd walk the halls, his once impeccable suit now looking like he'd slept in it, his eyes hollow. He'd try to rally the remaining staff with talk of rebuilding and refocusing on our core values, but the words rang hollow in the half-empty, echoing office. The energy was gone. The life had been sucked out of the place. All that was left was the expensive furniture and the crushing weight of what he'd lost. He'd made the fatal mistake of believing his own mythology. He thought the brand was the value. He thought the polish was the substance. Solomon Adebayo, and then the entire industry, had shown him the brutal truth. The substance is the value, and he'd thrown his away. Within 6 months, the whispers became a public reality. The for lease sign went up in the window of the sleek, cold office space. The iconic Whitlock and Shaw logo was taken down from the building's directory. The assets were sold off to pay creditors. The once great firm was reduced to a line item in a bankruptcy filing, a stark lesson in an industry textbook on how not to treat your talent. Bradley Whitlock didn't go down fighting. He just faded away. He became a consultant, a vague title for a man whose reputation was now a warning. He'd show up at industry events, and people would nod politely and then quickly turn away, as if his failure was a contagious disease. Meanwhile, the energy, the clients, the buzz, all of it flowed like a redirected river to a dusty warehouse in Westview. Jacobs' Design Collaborative became the place to be. We weren't just the feel-good story. We were the proof of concept. We were evidence that a different way of working, one based on passion, integrity, and real connection, wasn't just morally right, it was commercially brilliant. Our phone didn't stop ringing, but now the calls were different. They were from community boards, from nonprofits, from even a few brave corporate clients who wanted to tap into the authenticity we were famous for. They weren't just buying architecture, they were buying a piece of the story. They were buying the heartbeat. The ripple effect of that day in the lobby wasn't just the fall of one arrogant man. It was the rise of a new standard. Bradley's collapse was the fertilizer for our growth. His silence made room for our voice. And his empty, gleaming office stood as a monument to everything we had chosen to leave behind. The past was polished concrete and cold glass. The future was red Georgia clay, and it was ours to build on. A year to the day after the community center's grand opening, I was on site, which was my happy place. The building wasn't just a structure anymore. It was a living thing. The sound of kids laughing in the playground, the smell of coffee from the small cafe run by a local family, the low hum of a yoga class in the main hall. It was the heartbeat I'd promised, and it was beating strong. I was checking on a planter box where the herbs were getting a little leggy when I felt a presence behind me. I turned, and for a second, I didn't recognize him. It was Bradley Whitlock, but the man standing there was a faded photograph of the one I'd known. His suit was still expensive, but hung on him slightly, as if he'd lost weight. The arrogant glint in his eye was gone, replaced by a kind of weary emptiness. He looked old. "Sloane," he said, his voice raspy. He held his hands awkwardly at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. "Bradley?" I wiped my hands on my jeans. The anger was a distant memory, a cold stone at the bottom of a river I'd long since moved on from. Now, I just felt a faint, sad curiosity. What could he possibly want? He didn't offer a handshake. He just stood there, his gaze drifting over the center, taking in the vibrant mural on the side of the building, the groups of seniors chatting on the shaded benches, the undeniable life of the place. His eyes lingered on the roof, my roof, the elegantly curved one that channeled the rain. "It's very successful," he said finally. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he was speaking a language he'd only read about. "The press loves it. The Urban Land Institute Award. That's a big deal." I nodded, waiting. This wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. He sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to come from the soles of his dusty dress shoes. He finally looked at me, and the emptiness in his eyes was replaced by a stark, shocking honesty. "I misjudged the market," he said, the words flat and practiced, like he'd said them to himself in the mirror 1,000 times. "Authenticity. That's the new luxury. I didn't see it coming." And there it was, the full, breathtaking extent of his learning. The lesson he'd taken from losing his firm, his reputation, everything he'd built, was a business trend. He'd reduced a profound failure of character, a moment of deep human prejudice, to a simple miscalculation in market analytics. Authenticity is the new luxury. He'd absorbed the buzzword, but he'd completely missed the point. I looked at him, this hollowed-out man standing in the brilliant sunshine of a place he could never understand, and I felt a pang of something that wasn't pity, but something closer to grief. Grief for the person he could never be. "It was never about the market, Bradley," I said, my voice quiet but clear. I wasn't arguing. I was just stating a simple, immutable fact, like pointing out the sky was blue. It was always about people. He blinked, confused. The concept was too abstract, too unquantifiable for his new worldview. People weren't a market segment. They were a variable, a risk. He opened his mouth to say something else, to maybe try and fit this new idea into his broken framework, but then he stopped. He just looked at me, and for a single, fleeting second, I saw a flicker of something else. Not understanding, but a dim recognition of the canyon between us. A recognition that the language I was speaking was one he would never learn. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of a defeat that was far deeper than he even realized. Then he turned and walked away, back toward the parking lot, back to his diminished world of spreadsheets and trends. I watched him go until he was just a blur in the distance. Then I turned back to the planter box, to the real, tangible work of nurturing something. The soil was warm under my fingers. The lesson hadn't been in the grand confrontation or the dramatic fall. It was in this quiet moment, in the understanding that some people are so lost in their own reflection that they can never truly see the world around them. He'd gotten a lesson, all right, but he'd only read the headline. The air on opening day was electric, thrumming with a joy so palpable you could taste it. A mix of grilled pinchos from the food vendors, sweet pastelitos from Abuela's stand, and the clean scent of the new building itself. The plaza, my placita, was a sea of people. Kids weaved through the crowd with balloons. Abuelos sat fanning themselves on the benches, nodding in approval, and the entire community of Westview had turned out, dressed in their Sunday best. This wasn't a ribbon cutting. It was a block party, a baptism, a homecoming. I stood off to the side, near the low stage, my heart feeling too big for my chest. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, something bold and colorful that felt like me, but I was still wearing my beat-up Chucks. Some things don't change. Ben found me, clapping a hand on my shoulder, his eyes shining. "We did it, Jacobs. We actually did it." Before I could answer, a hush fell over the crowd as Solomon Adebayo stepped up to the microphone. He didn't need to ask for quiet. His presence commanded it. He looked out over the hundreds of faces, a genuine, warm smile on his face. "My friends," he began, his voice calm and carrying, "we are not here today to open a building. Buildings are made of steel and glass and concrete." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the joyful crowd, the families, the children. "We are here to open a home. A home is built with something far more powerful. It is built with trust, with respect, and most of all, it is built with love." He spoke not as a billionaire donor, but as a member of the community. He talked about his own father, an immigrant who had built a small grocery store that became the heart of his block. He talked about the duty we all have to create spaces that lift each other up. The crowd was captivated, nodding, laughing, a few wiping away tears. Then he turned his head, his eyes finding me in the crowd. "This home," he said, his voice softening, "had a blueprint drawn long before any lines were on paper. It was drawn in the heart of a visionary who saw not what was, but what could be. An architect who understands that the most important load-bearing structure isn't made of steel, it's made of community." He extended his hand toward me. "Sloane Jacobs, the community and I would be honored if you would say a few words." A wave of nervous energy shot through me, followed by a deep, grounding calm. This was it. This was the moment that dusty, rejected sketch in the lobby was always meant to lead to. I walked to the mic, the crowd erupting in applause that was deafeningly warm. I looked out and saw Abuela beaming, her hands pressed together as if in prayer. I saw Mr. Adebayo giving me a proud, fatherly nod. I saw my team, my brilliant, scrappy team, cheering the loudest. I leaned into the microphone, my voice a little shaky at first. My abuela always told me, una casa se hace de paredes y vigas. Un hogar se construye con amor y sueños. A house is made of walls and beams. A home is built with love and dreams. I took a deep breath, my voice strengthening. This place, it's built with your dreams, the dreams of every parent who wants a safe place for their kids to play, the dreams of every elder who wants a quiet spot in the sun, the dreams of a community that knows its own worth. I didn't talk about angles or materials or square footage. I talked about heart. I talked about the light that would stream into the daycare at exactly 10 a.m., and the way the acoustics in the hall would make a child's first recital sound magical. I talked about this place as a living thing, a member of the family. As I finished, the applause washed over me again. But my eyes were drawn to the front row. A young black girl, maybe 10 years old, was staring up at me, her eyes wide with a kind of rapt, silent awe. She wasn't clapping. She was just studying me, her head tilted as if she were trying to solve a wonderful, impossible puzzle. In her hands, she clutched a notebook and a pencil. In that moment, I saw myself. I saw the girl who loved to draw, who saw magic in lines and shapes, but who maybe never saw someone who looked like her standing on a stage, being called a visionary. The formalities ended. The music swelled, a live meringue band started up, and the plaza instantly transformed into a dance floor. People swarmed the building, exploring every corner with laughter and exclamations of delight. I lost sight of the girl for a while, caught in a whirlwind of hugs and congratulations. Later, as the sun began to dip lower, casting a golden glow over the red brick, I found her. She was sitting on the steps of the stage, her notebook open on her knees, her tongue stuck out in concentration as she sketched the building. I sat down next to her. "It's a good subject," I said softly. She jumped, then looked up at me, her eyes even wider. She nodded, suddenly shy. "Can I see?" I asked. Hesitantly, she turned the notebook around. It wasn't the building. It was a drawing of me at the microphone, with a big, squiggly sun above my head. Underneath, in careful, looping letters, she had written, "When I grow up, I want to build homes too." A lump formed in my throat. I looked from her drawing to her hopeful, earnest face. This was the real cornerstone. It wasn't the first piece of concrete we'd poured. It was this moment. It was this spark. I smiled at her, my vision blurry with happy tears. "You know what?" I said. "You absolutely will." I got up and left her to her drawing, the sounds of music and laughter swirling around me. I looked at the building, alive and pulsing with joy, and then back at the girl, already designing her future. The blueprint was complete, and it was perfect. At its heart, this story is a profound reminder that our true worth is never determined by the prejudice, arrogance, or short-sightedness of others. It's an internal flame of dignity, talent, and character that no one can extinguish but ourselves. The world often makes the mistake of judging a book by its cover, of valuing polish over substance and status over integrity. But this narrative shows us that real, lasting value in our work, our relationships, and our communities is built on a foundation of authenticity, respect, and the courage to hold fast to who we are, even when others try to diminish us. True justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration, the restoration of respect, opportunity, and the simple right to be seen for the content of your character and the quality of your contributions. It's a call to look beyond the surface in others and, most importantly, to never doubt the profound power you hold within. If this lesson resonated with you, we'd be deeply honored if you'd share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Let's build a community of support and understanding. Please like this video to help others find it and subscribe for more stories that challenge and inspire. May you always recognize your own immense value, and may you carry that certainty with you, creating pockets of light and justice wherever you go.